But first, I'm going to start with a story. So 2,500 years ago, in the marshes of East Yorkshire, fed by the runoff rains of the Pennine Spine of England, some folks threw some figurines into a bog. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see an example of this. These are the Rus-Kar figures, and they're a type of god dolly, anthropomorphic figures used for apotropaic, protective purposes that have been found across West Europe since the Neolithic, the New Stone Age. God dollies were typically erected in vast marshes or boggy lowlands, often alongside raised wooden trackways that helped them traverse these unpredictable and quite animate landscapes. And across Europe, these dolls typically come in biologically, sexually dimorphic pairs. And by that, I mean two dolls, one each representing each of the binary genders. But unlike these continental guys, the Rus-Kar figures on this slide each are a little different. They each have a removable phallus, and beneath them, a carved V at the groin, symbolizing a vulva. And can we go to the next slide, please, Debbie? Thank you. So as we can see, these are the dimorphic pairs that we've talked about, some from some of the bogs that Jenny might have been discussing in her talk as well. We can see that they're presently different, more curvaceous shapes for the female bog dolly and more sort of straight, taller figures for the male. So if we can go to the next slide, please. But the Rus-Kar figures that we started with are not alone in Britain and Ireland for being sexually ambiguous or fluid. These guys, as you can see here, the one on the left, the Somerset god dolly, has both breasts and a phallus. And the other two are similar to the Rus-Kar figures, where they have removable phalluses. But if these dolls were meant to protect people in animate, unpredictable landscapes, then why were they designed like this? If we can have the next slide, please. So looking back in time, I think can give us a clue. On the left here, you can see an artist's representation of a horned antler headdress. And in Mesolithic Britain, in Starcar, North Yorkshire, people created tens of these antler headdresses, wore them, and then deposited them in the watery depths of a post-glacial lake. And Mesolithic researchers think that by wearing these headdresses, spiritual leaders of the Starcar communities were potentially trying to become more than human, blurring the binary between human and non-human animals and becoming spiritually powerful because of that merging. And other examples of this merging can be seen across the world in these other images on the slide here, from cave art to engravings and sculptures like these. So far we've got blurred binaries between sexes and between animal types. This lack of heteronormative categorization, this freedom from binary opposition, is called non-duality, not two. And today we might also call that queer. Can I have the next slide, please? So the landscapes in which these artifacts are often found can hint to the potential uses and purposes of these objects. These are landscapes that are liminal, much like Jenny mentioned earlier, which I'm so excited to hear about that. We've got water bodies that are both water and land, like bog, marsh, and carr. We also have caves or dug pits, very popular in the Mesolithic, which could be both overground and underground at the same time. So these landscapes are binary defying in of themselves. And we think prehistoric peoples believed such places were spiritually powerful, following the three-world theory of there being one present world that we all live in now and two spiritual worlds outside of it. And liminal places were where the boundaries between these worlds were thinnest, and therefore potentially where people could commune with their gods in the much more easier. So both in object and place, indefinability was seemingly spiritually powerful in prehistoric Britain. And can I have the next slide, please, Debbie? Woohoo! Okay, so hello, I'm going to introduce myself after the story. I'm SK Marley. I'm a transgender, non-binary writer, researcher, and creative facilitator, and an MA student of Mesolithic Archaeology at the University of York. As a artist in residence for a project called Queer Natures, run by Dr. Ina Linger at the University of Exeter, I've created the project I'm going to talk about today, Our Transcapes. It's a social impact project that seeks to understand whether creative exploration of this prehistoric non-duality can support the mental well-being of transgender people in the UK today. Through psychogeography, creative writing, queer ecology, and queer archaeology, the project seeks to defy the present-day mainstream media myths of transness being new and unnatural. And I'm just going to flag here that there is a little bit of transphobia that I'm going to be discussing in the next part of this talk, and mentions of suicide. So if I can have the next slide, please. So we can see from this slide why this project might be useful. Between 2012 and 2022, when mainstream media really got hold of the trans issue that kind of came out of nowhere, anti-trans hate crime in the UK rose by 400%. And that's not even counting the increase that's likely happened since this April's trans exclusionary Supreme Court ruling on what defines a woman. A lot of these anti-trans myths are being internalized by trans people, as you might expect, particularly young trans people. And these two quotes on the right were taken from online trans spaces in which I'm a member. And I think they show that there's this desire to conform or be accepted, you know, either one, but both causing a lot of hurt. And yeah, this has vastly impacted trans people's mental health and has increased trans suicide quite noticeably. So the narratives of British history that are taught in schools tend to omit evidence of prehistoric non-duality. And historically, so has the field of archaeology itself, omitting findings that don't fit within our current day heteronormative expectations. And this has been highlighted to us by the field of queer archaeology, which is 25 years old this year. And it has helped us challenge our assumptions and our lenses when interpreting the past, or decolonizing, if you will. And this is a really exciting field, but a lot of its research is really hard to access for people of, you know, general public for various reasons, either behind paywalls or in language that they don't necessarily understand. So by engaging with this academic research as an artist and opening it up to a more embodied public engagement, I hope to improve the mental well-being of transgender people by improving feelings of belonging, naturalness and validity, and possibly even their trans power. So could I have the next slide, please? So in the project, trans participants are invited on a pilgrimage to local landscapes, or that sort of look as close as I could find to prehistoric ones. And by local, I mean the landscapes that participants are local to at the time, rather than the more essentialist idea of where they're from. Ecotherapeutic tools are then used to try and help participants to connect with their environments, but also get more inside their bodies, which is really hard for some trans people. And we then explore these stories of these non-dual artifacts that we've just seen, trace when the gender binary first appears in the archaeological record, which is apparently traceable, and see how even after that gender binary appearance, non-duality remained a spiritually significant practice in prehistoric Britain. And finally, after that lovely walk around what's probably a bog, we'll take a creative exercise where participants can imagine embodying or conversing with these artifacts. And then writing or drawing or speaking anything that communicates their feelings from this imagined storytelling. In doing so, using some narrative psychotherapy theory, I'm hoping that participants can have a narrative space between their own personal experiences of trans beingness to get to play and create and imagine a more empowered narrative about what it means to be trans today. In March, we ran a trial project and we received some lovely feedback. Some participants called the event life-changing. Others called it hugely positive and empowering. And in September, I'll be running another event with Peak Queer Adventures, who are here on the left. They are a non-hierarchical community group that seek to increase the visibility of queerness in the Peak District, near where I live. And then again on the right with Say It Sheffield, an inner city support organisation for young LGBTQ+ people. And after that, I would like to open the project up to the general public, frankly, because no matter how we identify, I think we can all find liberty in questioning the categories we are told to live in. And if I can have the final slide, please, Debbie. Thank you. So this more inclusive story of Britain can, I hope, help all of us to embrace a more authentic and less oppositional story of who and where we are, and by looking at the values and attitudes of those that walked these lands before us. By questioning the many dualities and binaries we live with today, very few of which apparently serve us, regardless of how we identify, I hope that our Transcapes can help re-invite participants back into their animality, into their landscapes, and into belonging. Thank you very much.